So if you'd like to hear any lore, and I mean any lore whatsoever, make sure you're in the Discord, because once a week I will ask a question, and the first person to get the question right or says something that just tickles my fancy picks lore for the week. And this week's lore, by way of Red Conquer in the Discord, is all about Moriarty and his saloon a very, very little bit. Now, I only say a little bit for the saloon because all it says on there is that it was established in 2230 by Moriarty's grandfather. That's really it. It doesn't say much more. So I said, you know what, I'll just do it on Moriarty. So Moriarty, by the time of 2277, is a 50-year-old man who has lived in Megaton pretty much his entire life. And that comes by way of Herbert Daring Dashwood. Herbert's been all over the place. He's probably been to Megaton a number of times, even though he's an honorary ghoul who lives in Tenpenny Tower. Herbert Daring Dashwood also claims that Colin Moriarty came here to the U.S., or the former U.S., when he was a child. So sometime during childhood, because he does have that thick Irish accent. Now, his father founded Moriarty's saloon and trade routes, and that's kind of how he made all of his money. He made it where it was a safe route. People knew you could come and go there from Megaton to places elsewhere in the Capital Wasteland. And in the unofficial guide, it says that his father was killed during a raider attack in 2241. Now, there's some discrepancies with the official guide. I consider the guides to be canon, personally, because there's little things in there that just feel like world building for the sake of world building. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but when it's something like Moriarty got his wealth because his dad was assassinated in 2241 when he was 14, and if it's not in the game, where else is it going to be but in the book? So there are things that are so inconsequential that, like, it makes sense to me that it would be canon. So I consider it canon. Now, his father is assassinated. He's killed during this attack in 2241. And Moriarty instantly, his first thing, he gets all of his dad's money, he gets all of his dad's land, and he goes, instantly, what we're going to do is we're going to put a wall up around Megaton, which is taken from a nearby airport. But because of this, people kind of look to him as a leader. And I get into this a little bit more later, because Megaton doesn't really have a leader. There's Moriarty, who controls the money and the booze and the prostitutes and the chems. And then there's Lucas Sims, who's a representation of what order is. Being a bar, the three biggest things that he deals in, the four biggest things that he deals in is booze, chems, prostitutes, and most importantly, rumors. Nova, the prostitute who's there, direct quote says, he sells information so much you'd think the bar was just a hobby. Kind of like, there's an episode of Cheers, which, by the way, if you haven't seen Cheers, it slaps. Only watch up until about Coach dies, and then you can stop watching, but it's really good. Spoilers for Cheers, if that's a thing, for a almost 40-year-old show. There's a scene in Cheers where Sam Malone is like, Ted Danson's like, someone's at the bar telling an interesting story, and he's like, you don't tell me? Like, that's half the fun of having a bar, is hearing the interesting stories. So because he's the number one place of commerce inside of Megaton, he hears all sorts of stories from all over the place. It's a big reason why he knows who your dad is. So Moriarty, like I was saying prior, Moriarty claims that Lucas Sims is an illusion, a facade, if you will, of what order is. He believes that he's the only sort of law in that town because he controls the money. And a lot of people in town believe this as well. They look to Moriarty as some sort of a bastion of hope in a weird, dystopian, capitalistic way. They see him as well, he brings caravans here. He brings people here. We need to listen to him. Now, Lucas Sims is aware of this to an extent. He understands that he is the physical representation of what law, order, and justice is and should be, but he knows that people will tend to side with Moriarty because he has money. Now, Moriarty's number one competition inside of Megaton is the Brass Lantern, and because of this, he does not like Andy Stahl. I actually don't have it written down in the notes here, but he claims to piss in Andy Stahl's still. Why? Just make a better product. Don't piss in somebody's cereal. Now, all this being said, if you can't already tell from the way I talk about Moriarty and what I've said, he's lower than Scum. Lower than scum whatsoever. He bought Gob the Ghoul. Hey, Baba Goop. He bought the man who works in his bar, Gob, from slavers. So he is working for him for pretty much free, right? He might give him a couple caps here and there, but he's working for him. He probably doesn't pay him shit. He makes his slave Gob pay for room and board, and he is to reimburse Moriarty for the caps that Moriarty spent to purchase him. You're awful. You're the worst. You're the worst human imaginable. Moriarty also thinks that the good fight is a pipe dream. He thinks that it's silly and it's a waste of time, and that you shouldn't care about it, and the only thing you should do is go to Megaton and never leave and buy from his store. He's exactly what is wrong with the old world in these games. Personified. And what's really cool is that he actually knew the Lone Wanderer, James, the Lone Wanderer's father, and Star Paladin Cross when the Lone Wanderer was a baby, because when they left Project Purity and made their way over to when they made their way over to Vault 101 during that pilgrimage, you as a baby stood in one of his rooms, which I think is super neat. Now, I get all of my lore off of fallout.fandom.com. I pretty much have the main majority of it down. There's a couple things that I just wanted to read real quick off the wiki. He's involved in a handful of quests. Some fun stuff. If by any means the Lone Wanderer is wearing Lucas Sims' sheriff's duster inside the saloon, Moriarty will state, "Who do you think you are wearing that badge in here?" Which, now that I think about it, could be you think you have some sort of authority, but part of me kind of read that as you have no right to wear that man's uniform. You have no right to wear that man's uniform. That man was a hero. I took it as Moriarty had some sort of a respect for Lucas Sims. Maybe I'm looking too deep into it. Maybe I'm not. Who knows? But I do really like that line of dialogue. I wish I wish he was a little, like I say, for every entry in Fallout 3, I wish there was a little more for him to go off of. Either way, he's a neat character, a real piece of shit, and an awful, awful human. But that, my friends, is, in fact, lore.